Alright guys, this is DooM for the Game Boy Advance. Now, I'm sure we all know what DooM is, and DooM was ported to the Game Boy Advance, came out in October of 2001. It was, of course, published by Activision, but it was developed by David A. Palmer Productions, which we saw on the boot up screen there. And they did a really good job on this version. This is pretty darn impressive for the Game Boy Advance. I kind of think of it as a cross between the graphics of the 32X and the sound of the Super Nintendo. The music is slightly altered, but it's really good music. The sound effects are really good, and the graphics are really good. I mean, it's full textured on like the Super Nintendo version, and it runs pretty good, except for a few times, like when you get into larger areas. There's a little bit of slowdown sometimes, but for the most part, it runs pretty smooth. Now they have an option for the lighting. You can do dynamic lighting or static lighting. With the dynamic lighting, you'll have kind of like all the different rooms, different light levels, and the lights can flash. You can have like the flickering lights and stuff like that. I actually find that A, it runs a little bit faster with the static lighting selected, and B, it's a little easier to see because you don't get some of the rooms that are too dark on the Game Boy Advance screen, so it keeps everything a little bit easier to see. So it's got 3 episodes from like the original DooM. Most of the levels are in there, but there are a few that aren't. And well, I'm gonna of course go for the first episode because, you know, it's my favorite. And well, I'll just put it on hey, not too rough. It's gonna be a little hard to play. I'm actually looking at the camera right now, because I've got the camera about 4 inches away from the screen, so it's going to be a little hard to play. Now, L&R Strife, just as you would expect. B runs and opens doors. A shoots. You hold L&R and press up and down to change weapons, and it works really good. I mean, it's a really good control scheme. Now, the reason I wanted to show this style and not go into like a screen edit or an emulation is because I wanted to show this game actually running on the Game Boy Advance. You know, so there's no questions about is the emulator running it smoother than the real Game Boy Advance, and sometimes that's the case. You know, if you run DooM on the Super Nintendo on the emulator, it will run a little bit faster and smoother. And you know, that's no good for a video like this, is I wanted to show this running on the actual Game Boy Advance so you see exactly how it runs. And here's a good example of the music. The music is very good on the Game Boy Advance. You know, keep in mind right now we're listening to it through the mono speaker. I'm sure it would sound even better if we had stereo headphones. And the sound effects are bang on. And like I said, the graphics, you know, they're pretty much bang on. You know, it does slow down a little bit in some of the bigger areas, especially outside. But it's no worse than the 32X version. Holy crap. Overall, the 32X version runs pretty smooth, but it does slow down in some areas. I would say when this one's running smooth, like in a small room, it's actually smoother than the 32X version. This version runs very, very fast and smooth when it's not slowing down. Now when it does slow down, you will notice it a little bit. Change this up a little bit. Like I said, most of the levels are here. There's only really a few, I think, that have been removed to fit it on the cartridge. And all the enemies except for a few, which is very common on the console versions. Like, you don't have some of the larger Cyber Demon enemies. But, you know, that's no big deal. Here we're outside, and you'll see it slow down just a little bit, but I mean, it's still manageable. It's not as bad as the Super Nintendo version at its best. You know what I mean? Like, the slowest parts in this version are still better than the Super Nintendo at its best times. Right there, it's a little bit, as you can see. You know, outside coming in kind of does certainly slow down a bit. And then, like I said, I have it on static lighting, which helps a little bit too, I think. Might just be a trick. I think it does help a little bit. Let me show you. You can go in here and change it. Right now it's on static lighting. Now it's on dynamic lighting. You can see how everything gets darker from the static lighting. Look at the walls, eh? To dynamic lighting. Option didn't take. He got hit A. There we go. Now we'll run a little bit slower on dynamic lighting. I mean, but it's still good. I mean, it's still perfectly playable. It's much faster than the Super Nintendo version, and you got full textures on the roof and floor. And like I said, it just gets a little darker on. Gets a little too dark on the dynamic lighting. You can change the brightness too. You can turn the brightness up, but I just find it's a lot easier to see everything on this screen with the static lighting on. Let me get out of here. Here's an example of, you know, having a lot of enemies on the screen at a time. Yeah, there you go. I mean, the enemies do disappear, depending on how many enemies on the screen. You'll notice they'll fall to the ground and then they'll kind of disappear. But that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, overall, it's an amazing port. I mean, it's probably one of the best cartridge ports, if you think about it. Because you got the graphics of basically the 32X version, and you got the sound effects and music of basically the Super Nintendo version. and you know, it fits in your pocket. You got basically all the levels except for a few, and you know, you can play it on the go. So this is very well done, very good job.